Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Tarter Sauce. I'm Steve Tarter. With me today, I'm delighted to have an old friend, Molly Crusen Bishop, with us. And Molly, you've got the St. Patrick's green on,
I do.
which is great. Even though we don't have a parade today in
No.
downtown Peoria, we're still celebrating St. Patrick's Day. And you've got an interesting message there. Save our Madison Theater. This is a new project for you.
Absolutely.
What's going on with the Madison now? We know it's the Grand Old Theater in Peoria.
Yes. So, not that long ago, but within the past month, there was the Spurk Mansion up on Knoxville. We found out there was a demolition order, meaning just neighborhood activists, people who like historic buildings in Peoria, and we found out there was a demolition order. Well, a few years ago, the city of Peoria passed a halt on demolitions for buildings like this. That was a 9,000 square foot mansion with mostly the original interior. It had a fire, so there's a lot of smoke damage in some of the beams in the basement. So it'll be expensive to fix those, but the rest of it, the upper 4 floors or whatever, are in great condition.
And are one of a kind.
So,
Yeah.
yes. So we put appeals out through social media and to local entities, and apparently somewhere along the way, Mr. Blickenstaff purchased it, and we were very excited.
Very good. Well, that's what Molly does.
It was a
Molly,
130-year-old home.
knowledge of history is one thing, and then to save it and keep it alive, that's another. So,
So the T-shirt. Okay, let me get to the T-shirt.
Right.
So online, Lee Malcolm, who was I think he was a DJ on WIRL for a long time,
guy.
and I joined forces online and just formed a grassroots. No board members, we're just volunteers, called Preserving Peoria,
Right.
to put efforts into getting awareness, and hopefully investors and developers and different people interested in a couple other projects, hence the Save the Madison 2020.
Very good.
Local artist Suzette Boulay is just wonderful. She waived the design fee and did this within 24 hours and helped us get it done.
Great.
The teachers are 15. And then extra large sizes are 18, and people can still order.
Get them online.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, in a way. We were actually going to have a meeting with Peoria Made to sell them eventually there.
Right.
But
Just down the
everything's
street
on
from
hold,
here.
hold
Yep.
right now. But you can still, yes, you can still order if you connect to me.
Okay.
So the message is we're trying to get a collaborative effort with different investors. We have somebody that's going to be applying for grants and endowments. And we actually had an architectural firm in New York call me last week. They found something I wrote online, and it's called Evergreen Architectural Arts. And a lady named Pat Cogan, we've had 2 very at-length conversations, and they specialize in theaters restoration for theaters like the Madison, and they have done over 400 theaters across the country like this.
Wow.
So I'm getting connections through an online petition and things like that. And so we're getting interest where it's way outside of Peoria now. For our culture of historic theaters.
So not all the news is coronavirus. We have some other news.
And in fact, the Madison will be 100 years old on October 16th, 2020 of this
Very
year.
good.
So
Very
we're
good.
hoping that we can, work together locally and nationally to get interest and then money and grants to help start saving this. It could take years. It could take 20 years to get all the money to save it. But
Do you remember seeing a movie at the Madison?
I think I saw Star Wars there when I was little, or Superman, I'm not sure. I saw the Blues Travelers there when I was pregnant with my second child.
When they were doing their rock band thing.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that was great.
I always think of the Madison because it was the first film I saw in Peoria in 1967, To Sir with Love.
Oh,
was
I
playing
love
down
that
there.
movie.
Yeah. So that was I remember that being
a
down
great
to
one.
Madison. Well, anyway, we're here with the one thing that's great about Molly is she's always got so much information, history. You've co-written a book recently.
I have.
What's the title?
The name of the book is Footprints of Our Forefathers with Lisa A. Gavin and myself.
So you both collaborated on this,
Yes.
and what's that about?
We both wrote about our ancestors' personal trucks from Europe and Eastern
How they got here.
Eastern United States in the 1800s and how they ended up in Peoria and what the working class was doing here.
Oh, okay.
An example, she had a grandfather that worked at Silco when there wasn't even electricity yet. He had
Really?
her, yes, and then mine, my grandfather worked for the Rock Island Railroad in the I think 1870s, 1880s.
Oh, great
So
institution.
it's fun, and it has our family stories. But I think anyone that lives in Peoria County will be inspired by what the working class were doing in that time period.
You just have one project.
Yeah, I'm
folds
working
into
on the
another.
next one already. So
But one thing we've talked about with Molly before, and I think what's the title? We're celebrating women getting the vote. 100 years.
suffrage movement.
That's one thing that's going on. I think it's National Women's Month or something.
I'm sure it is.
So in that regard, whatever that formal title is, you've got some great research on famous Peorians, or maybe not so famous, but they should be famous. Why don't you tell us a little about one of the ones, and you've written about this
Absolutely.
locally.
I have. I started writing for Women's View magazine in 2015. And actually, it might have been 2014, but this article was from 2015. And I found a lady named Annie Malone. And at the time, I believe the magazine went out to around 8,000. There were 8,000 printed and dropped off in hundreds of locations around Peoria.
Right.
And I also was getting paid to deliver them.
Oh.
So I always tried to find ways to fund my writing.
Good.
Because it takes a while to get money as a writer.
Right.
So I was getting paid a couple $100 a month to deliver about 4,000 of them.
Okay.
For a Star, a
All
lady
over
named
the-
Star,
all
all
over
over
the
the
community.
Peoria, yeah. And so I would ask them about, hey, have you ever heard of Annie Malone? And
No one did.
it took me a couple years before I finally, everywhere I would go, literally, I would do speaking events at schools and things like that, and I would always tell them about Annie Malone, and I'll tell you about the next lady next. She's very interesting too. But I was really, it was very crystal clear how much history locally and of stifled history has been, like especially of people of minorities, people of color, have been kept out of our stories because she has international significance as one of the first African American millionaires and philanthropists. And I had
the
never heard of
country?
her in the country. In 1923, her company was valued at $14 million. She owned a college called Peoria College in St. Louis. She employed over 75,000 African American women around the country and other countries as well. So, and she was a huge philanthropist too.
Did she spend her early years in Peoria?
So she was the 10th of 11th children to former slaves from Kentucky, and she was born in southern Illinois in a town called Metropolis.
Oh, yeah. Which now has a Superman statue.
Yes.
Yeah.
And her parents died when she was young. Her father actually served in the Union. And she was sent up to Peoria when they passed away, an older sister, to live here. And so she attended Peoria Central High School off and on. This is the 1800s.
Yeah.
So you got to keep things in check. It wasn't like now where
Yeah.
if you drop out before then. But she had some health issues, but she discovered wonderful hair grower. And she was just brilliant and kind, and she just gave back to her community. And anyone that worked for her, no matter what, man, woman, she helped them. There's actually a major scholarship at most of the African American colleges still going on. And in downtown St. Louis, something she founded was it was called something different then, but now it's called the Annie Malone Women and Children's Service
Is she
Center.
more prominent in St. Louis than perhaps
Yes,
she is here?
yes.
Okay.
But she's it's becoming a thing. I befriended the president and vice president of the Annie Malone Historical Society on Facebook.
Okay.
Linda Nance is the founding president, and she's a good friend of mine, and Linda Jones is a good friend of mine, and she's the vice president.
And there's a book on her now.
There's a book on her now
yeah.
too. James, I think his name is James Bryson, wrote, and I
We've had
actually
James on.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so I met these ladies I think 3 years ago, and Linda Jones actually found me from an article on the Peoria, an online magazine that I wrote about her. And then they came to Peoria last year. I got them to come and speak to the DAR at the Flanagan House last
yeah.
year. So when they were doing the dedication at the Riverfront Museum, the founding president, Linda Nance, came to Peoria, and I got to spend some time with her during that week. So it was really lovely. But yes, they're hoping to purchase a historic building in downtown St. Louis and turn it into a community center similar to like the East Bluff
And her
Community
name?
Center. Linda Nance.
Okay.
Linda Nance and Linda Jones.
Okay.
But it's all about Annie, and it will have her name in it.
Oh,
so,
very good.
Yeah, very nice.
So who else you got?
So let's move on to Elizabeth Lindsey Davis.
Another prominent Peoria.
Another prominent Peorian that I had never heard of, and it took me a really long time to start finding people who had heard of her. Because Dr. Romeo Garrett actually used to teach about them in his classes.
Oh, okay.
So some of the older generation I was finding, ultimately.
Had heard of them.
So Elizabeth was born here in Peoria in 1855. Her father, at the time in the city directories, is listed as mulatto, which now we call biracial, which is the proper word. And he was from Pennsylvania. He is considered one of the state of Illinois pioneers, even though he came here as a child. So he was one of the original first 8 African-American people here in Peoria. So her whole family is very interesting.
What was the name again?
His name is Thomas Harris Lindsay. Her name is Elizabeth Lindsey Davis. But she was a historian, a teacher. She founded dozens of women and children service clubs, and which would provide food, it would provide bail, it would provide a place to rent, because a lot of times, even after the Civil War, there were places even in Illinois would not rent to African Americans and things like that. It was keeping an eye on her community, but she was also a national historian. She chronicled the suffrage movement in Lifting as We Climb, a book she wrote in 1933.
Wow.
She just has international significance, and she was born here.
1855, and she wrote it in 33, so she was like 80 or something?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, she was brilliant. She was a teacher. She taught in several different states. So at the time in Peoria, when she was a little girl, there was not really school for African American children. And it would come sporadically. Sometimes good citizens would donate a few $100s to pay a teacher to do it at Ward Chapel, AME Church, at that time. Not in the same location, but the original AME Church. But it would be a couple months long.
Okay.
And it wasn't all year, like the little other children.
Like supplementary
yes.
school.
So her father and mother were brilliant. They found an integrated high school in Princeton, Illinois. So she and her sister and her brothers were all had a second, not only a great, education, but they were able to get high school degrees, the equivalent of what would be a high school degree. So that's how she became a teacher.
That's interesting. Princeton,
Illinois. It has a lot.
A neat community. I've
It
been
was
up
a
there.
stop along the Underground Railroad too.
Okay. Yeah.
If you cut it's so it was blowing my mind that just these two women, and I just kept thinking, if it took me 5 minutes to start finding these women and nobody around town had really heard of them, or I wasn't interacting with them, or they weren't being taught in schools, we'll say that. How many other Annie Malones and Elizabeth Lindsey Davises are out there?
Right.
So now I always try to promote them. I just got done speaking at Franklin and Lincoln and Whittier, 4th grades, for the See It, Be It program. I told them all about the ladies.
What program?
See It, Be It program.
See It, Be It.
About communications as a writer.
Okay.
And so I always find a way to add them in. So, and I always challenge them at the end, please Google Annie Malone, please Google Elizabeth Lindsey Davis. Research them, tell your moms about them, tell your family about them. So I'm trying to plant seeds so everyone can start finding more Annies and more Elizabeths. I can talk.
I like the phrase you used earlier in our conversation would make a great website. Suppressed history. Is that right?
I call it stifled history.
Stifled.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Oh,
Stifled
it is.
history.
It is so clear cut. These are just two examples. If these are two from Peoria, Illinois, who were born or had a significant part of their childhood here, and they're not teaching it in local schools and things like that, well, guess what? That means there's thousands of Annies and thousands of Elizabeths across the country.
You're bringing us up at a good time because, and I don't know what all the schools are doing.
Yeah.
But right now, everything is online.
It is.
They're telling the kids to stay at home, of course, and
Yes.
we understand. But at the same time, I guess depending on the age level, you may have a program online, or you may be just spending a lot more time with something to do. This would be a time to do some of that historic
Yeah,
research.
I actually have the ability to record audio podcasts on my laptop. So that's something I've actually considered doing. Since I did one for a year called Tales from the Whiskey City. And there is one in the National Internet Archive on Annie and Elizabeth. I can find it and tag you later.
Before you
so
get
that
into
people
your
can learn
next
about
one,
it. Sure.
I wanted to ask you something, because this is, sort of just thinking about it when somebody comes up and says, "Oh, the women now are celebrating 100 years of getting the vote," and we all either know that or should know that. But at the same time, what we may not know is there was a long period of women
Absolutely.
wanting to get the vote, going back to the 19th century, and I'm sure there's
Absolutely.
many players. And I'm wondering, Peoria women part of that were pushing very hard to get the vote before it came?
Yes, very much so. And a good example is Elizabeth Lindsay Davis.
She was one of those.
She was a founding member. I'll have to find the link. I'll have to find the term. But what was part of a women's suffrage movement in Illinois, and she was president of it for 20 years. So it later, I believe, it connected or interconnected into the NAACP at a later point. But she was the president of what the earlier part for suffrage movement was. And then my Captain Greenhut, Captain Joseph Greenhut's wife, Clara Wolfner Greenhut, and their daughter, which I'll have to find her name. I might be Clara as well. But they were huge activists for the suffrage movement here in Peoria.
Okay.
And then around the 19-teens, we'll just say 19-teens, moved to New York. And Clara and her daughter signed what I believe was the first petition in New York for the suffrage movement.
Oh, okay.
From the research that I have. It's been a while since I've been through that.
Right.
But it's kind of neat, we have
Well, it just
Peorians making their way out into the world.
And what is your view, and this is maybe somewhat general in terms of making an observation on history, but we know that Peoria has a fabled past, and
Yes.
you've done a great job of bringing some of that out.
Thanks.
But there's always sort of the men that are Green Hut and so forth, and that's understandable.
Yes.
That was the society.
Yes.
But then you have these women that maybe didn't get all the publicity, but they were very active. I mean, I've always heard
trailblazers.
the women were the ones you mentioned, the Madison Theater.
Yes.
Well, I know that the theaters were the wives.
It was huge.
On various
Yes.
committees that
Yes.
pushed for that.
And Mrs. Greenhut was very active in the Peoria Women's Club and the Grand Opera House, and and her husband was one of the benefactors for the Grand Opera House that was on Hamilton.
Right.
That had performers from all over the world come
Okay.
to Peoria. So yes, and my great grandmother.
Oh, well, let's
So
what's
talk
her
about
name?
what women were doing in the 1800s in Peoria. So my great grandmother, Ellen McGowan Needham, was born in County Leitrim. And what a wonderful day today to talk
Yeah,
about it. I didn't even
exactly.
realize that today when I
Wearing
grabbed
the
this one.
green.
So my mom's side of the family, three great-grandparents came from Ireland. They were born there.
Okay.
And she was one of them. So Ellen McGowan Needham and her husband Patrick Needham were born in County Leitrim, Ireland, which is in the northern half, and ended up coming to Peoria in the 1870s. And she actually went door to door in the West Bluff raising money to build St. Mark's Church.
Really?
So
Wow.
the women were raising the funds. They might not have been physically doing the physical work, but they were doing the planning, coordinating,
As they do
and
today.
facilitating of the funds. How big is that?
yeah.
That my great grandmother was a part of building St. Mark's Church.
Right.
And my grandfather was a very important person for the Irish community here too. He was the first president of the Ancient Order of the Hibernians here in Peoria, with the first group. He actually.
And that's the group, incidentally, that runs the parade every year.
It is,
Still.
yes,
Although,
yes.
unfortunately, this year they don't get to have a parade. Next year.
No, but you know what? We're gonna walk with our green shirts in the West Peoria 4th of July parade.
Oh, good.
So
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll welcome anyone from
Yeah.
St. Patrick's Society who wants to walk there.
Very good. So just hang on to that. Hang on to
Hang
that
on,
green.
hang on.
You'll
hang on
get
to
your
the
chance
green.
in July 4th.
And Aaron Fest too is a
Okay.
lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
I was actually one of the original Irish dancers in Peoria.
Were you?
My mom was obsessed with Irish, obsessed. Her grandmother, Kate Nolanwa, was born in Ireland as well, and then her paternal grandma and grandpa were born in Ireland. So she was very proud of her Irish heritage. And when she found there was this guy named Mark, and I think it was 1982, 81 or 82 in Peoria, who was from U of I, but he was originally from Chicago and had trained in Irish dancing, a soft shoe and hard shoe in Ireland, and he was willing to come to Peoria, and he taught us.
Oh, my
So
goodness.
Grania Kenny, Mahoney, Megan Hannigan, all the Doyle sisters, Aaron, Bridget, Shannon, there was a couple more, and I and several others, we performed at all the St. Patrick's Day parades, then the Pier Marquette, then the Holiday Inn, then an old folks home on Northmore. I think it's Independent Village, maybe. And then we would go to the big party at Donley's had at Expo Gardens every year. So we were literally dancing from the morning until way late at night, probably in places we shouldn't even have been.
See,
but my mom loved it, and we had fun. We did that from about 3rd or 4th grade till about 8th grade. So it was a blast.
Molly, you know how to close our show because here we are on St. Patrick's Day.
I can't believe I know.
You just gave us the whole St. Patrick's ritual. Well, there's obviously our time here is up, but we want to kind of have you come back and maybe there's so much history that you're involved
Peoria?
with, and we'll hear about the Madison.
And I
and
encourage
all the rest.
everybody to find James Bryson's book about Annie Malone. I'm sure it's available online. Look for my book and Lisa Gavin's book, Footprints of Our Forefathers, on Amazon.
Yeah,
Just Google it.
you people are going to be spending all
And
this
buy it
time.
online.
You're spending all this time
Learn
at
about
home.
Peoria and Annie. I
Read.
can't wait to meet James. That's one person that I really need to
he's a
connect
great
with
guy.
and meet. That's
Great
what
guy.
Linda Nance said. She said he took her to Manual, and she said he out energized her by leaps and bounds. And he actually ended up having her teach a class about Annie to some of the Manual students. And he forewarned her, there's some of the children might have, be the ones on the edge a little bit. And
Right.
she said they were just very engaged and very interactive with her, and their minds were blown.
Well,
So,
we always
yeah.
enjoy it.
Thank
There's
you.
so much history that we need to know. Molly, you have to come back. And
you. I would
hopefully
love to.
when times are normal.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to sit 12 feet away.
I know,
and,
exactly. And disinfect everything
Yeah.
before and after.
And
yeah.
keep safe, everybody. And we'll
Keep
see
safe, absolutely.
We'll
and
see you
and
next
happy
time.
St. Patrick's Day.
you on Tarter Sauce. See you later.
PeoriaLife.com